All right, folks, I think we're going to go ahead and get started here. Good lands, that's a loud PA system. How's everybody doing today? Good. Awesome. So I was kind of introduced in the last session here, but for anyone who missed that, name's Matthew Merzdorf. I serve as Director of Industry Partnerships for Purdue University. I work directly with Dr. Luna Liu. So we report directly up centrally on some of the major initiatives and key core areas that the president of Purdue University is looking at expanding and aligning the whole university collectively towards. So this has been a very exciting conversation so far with the panelists, and we're going to carry that forward today in the discussions around how we can create project-based classroom experience with and in alignment with industry partners that are going to deliver forward-thinking progress in the way universities align themselves, in the way that industries align their models to better collaborate and coordinate with the academic sector, and we can create a more productive, efficient, and value-based model together cohesively. So leading things off here are a couple of things that we're going to be doing today. We're going to start off the workshop by first and foremost exploring some conversations and ideas around reflecting internally on internal structures, internal divisions, internal academic sector areas, disciplinary spaces, with the idea being of getting a better knowledge of where we stand today as a foundation for where we want to go tomorrow. Following up on that, we're going to go immediately into exploration questions on understanding how does the circumstance and situation that we find ourselves in this current industrial area, how does this then broaden into a larger ecosystem? What are some of the players? What are some of the stakeholders? Who are some of the folks that really have a voice in helping to direct how things move forward? And how can we better interact with some of those areas to make the conversations that we're having in the smaller microcosm area extend out into the larger ecosystem space? From there, we're going to really get into the meat and potatoes of the workshop, which is exploring potential ideas for opportunities to create new programs, new project, and new focal areas, and give you guys the opportunities to think about this outside of individual constraints and in terms of what might help the ecosystem, what might grow the ecosystem, what will take us to the next level and where we want to be, not necessarily confined by restrictions at this space, just ideating in general. But of course, like every balloon that lifts off, it does need to have a tether to keep it to the ground. And so that's where we'll move then into what does industry's perspective have on this? Where are the ideas that we have in relation to where they would like to see us move? What is it that grounds us here? And that's where we're going to touch a little bit onto some collaborative models where we can get ideation and insight and collective thinking with the broader industry space to make sure that the programs and projects that we're starting off on are really tied in, practical, value-based, and do generate the results that industry and academia both want to see moving forward. Then we're going to go towards some action questions just to wrap things up, which are really going to focus down on those things that you want to take with you from this workshop and apply in your own respective areas. If you're an industry representative that wants to take some of these ideas for academic interaction and impart them into your own divisions and own individual spaces, for progressive movement forward with relationship and partnership building across the academic sector, that's something that you'll be able to do as a result of this workshop. And then if you're on the academic sector, hopefully this will open up some new mindsets and some new concepts on how you want to be more broadly engaging with industry outside of some of the more traditional models that you really have fallen into because of certain constraints and mindsets as they exist. How can we expand and start thinking outside of the box as a university and as an organization? So that's kind of the hope and intent of the workshop here. And first and foremost, before we get things going, I think one of the best things that we can do is kind of just go around the horn and do a couple of quick introductions. You can just go around the horn starting with this table, just name and organization that you represent. I think that'd be awesome. Starting here.
Yeah, I'm Josh Polk. I am faculty at Purdue in Indianapolis, teaching theme and experience design, user experience design.
I'm Megan. I'm with Tate. I manage our global learning and development efforts.
I'm Mercer Applin. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Theater here at Purdue.
I'm Ian Hunter from Charlotte Collaborative. We're a theater design consultant in San Francisco, and I'm with Purdue as well.
Outstanding. Okay, over here.
John, I'm with PRG. I'm Ignazi from Barcelona, Spain, from engineering school.
Casey,
Casey Alley Foreman. I'm the associate producer at the University of Oklahoma and the president of USITT.
Teresa Lauricella, I'm a professor and program coordinator at Clark State College in Springfield, Ohio.
Rich Dione, the co-director of the Fusion Studio for Entertainment and Engineering here at Purdue.
Wonderful. Over here?
Steve Burnside, technical director at University of Louisiana Monroe.
Evan Helbweier, I'm chair of Arts and Entertainment Technology and a teaching assistant professor at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and director at USA.
I'm Maddie Vaughn. I'm a fundraiser for the College of Engineering at Purdue.
I'm LT. I'm a faculty technical director at the David Geffen School of Drama at Yale.
Outstanding. Over here?
Monica Ramsey, Children's Museum of Indianapolis.
Matt Jackson, Adirondack Studios.
Brian Honeycutt, Honey Badger Consulting and Halo Solutions.
Perfect.
Kevin Hines, Carnegie Mellon School of Drama.
Wonderful. Thank you. And you guys over here?
Hi, my name is Pablo. I come from Barcelona, like Ignacy, and I am a professor of mechanical engineering.
Rachel Yanni. I work as the operations manager at the Fusion Studio for Entertainment and Engineering here at Purdue.
Jennifer Carroll. I'm faculty at Indiana University at the Luddy School of Informatics and Computing and Engineering. And I'm from the informatics perspective. I teach a class on immersive storytelling and experience design.
Chris Rogers. I am assistant dean for Purdue Polytechnic Institute, as well as a faculty member in themed entertainment design in Indianapolis, and I also do work supporting the Fusion Studio.
Lee Curis, I am a controls engineer at Winger Corporation and also Purdue.
I'm Nandini Dini. I'm a faculty here at Purdue, and I work in the area of entertainment graphics and human-computer interactions.
Fantastic. Thank you all very much. It's great to see that we have such a huge variety, and it's a good mixture of academia to industry so that we get some good perspectives here today. That's fantastic. Now, when we talk about the theater industry, or any industry in general, whether it's high tech or small tech or any of these different software areas, etc., it's important to understand from the get-go that we aren't ever really referring to any one industry sector, because everything is interdependent upon each other. And that's one of the things that we really kicked off with in the discussions earlier today, is that when you talk about theater industry or semiconductor industry or tech industry, there's always a whole nother layer of, well, how can these areas begin to talk better together, and how can they better interconnect with one another to make things happen that ordinarily a single industry sector is incapable of doing itself. And so one of the things that I think that we should really lead off with in regards to workshopping and ideation and coming up with some ideas is really associated with what kind of existing engagements happen within the theater industry, and how do these kind of interactions define what we do today. So as performing arts and as the theater are all doing their thing, what kind of tech innovations, what kind of developments in organizational leadership, in industrial engineering and logistics management, human resources processing, what are kind of the interactions that help to create ecosystems within this industry? Additionally, we need to think about who's going to benefit most from partnerships that are established that help to grow this ecosystem. Because there is such a level of networking, there is such a degree of interdependency. Understanding who is benefiting and why these things organically are developed and also are intentionally and deliberately are developed is really important for moving forward. There are also a number of assumptions that tend to underlie current engagement models, particularly on the academic side. There's an assumption related to what value looks like. There's an assumption based on what's the impact going to be. And on the industry sector, there's an ROI expectation and a number of other different factors that will, in fact, govern what kind of partnerships are established across academia, across industry models, across different groups. And so understanding and having some idea of what these different assumptions are will help us to get a framework of understanding better of how we can create our own organic structures and our own different partnership connection lines. And then last but not least, defining success. So this is something that everyone always has their own different spin on, depending on what sector, depending on what area, where you're coming from, where you're going, you know? Ultimately, the definition of success is in fact an intrinsic part of understanding how a partnership is going to contribute value. Because at the end of the day, the deliverables that come out, the next steps that are decided upon, the formulation of long-term strategies, these are all based on an underlying assumption of what is success, what are the goals we're achieving, what is the outcome we're looking for. So having some idea of how success is defined within the industry and within these different partnership spaces, these are really important factors to really understanding how the landscape really and truly exists. Now, I've been talking a little bit here about all these different things, but what I want you guys to do now is within your table, so you're all split up into individual tables, I'd like you guys to spend the next couple of minutes working through these different questions and coming up with some answers from your own perspectives, not necessarily all sharing the same thing on the same page, but all sharing certainly some degree of your insights and what you yourselves see in your own very specific areas and how that can in turn impact the larger understanding of the picture. So we're going to take the next couple of minutes here, and I'm going to be going around, and if there's anything I can contribute personally, let me know. But that being said, go ahead and just kick it off and get started. Since you guys have had a chance to now kind of formulate some ideas around these concepts, what I'm going to need is for each one of you guys at each of the tables to come up with what you believe is a core fundamental piece of the current landscape that is transformational in that it dictates how we operate and the relationships and partnerships that we build. So what are some foundational pieces based on these assumptions, based on these ideas that we've been talking about here? What are some pieces that constitute the foundation for if we're going to understand this world, this area that we're operating in, what do we need to know? What's the basis for where we operate from? Okay, so we're going to take a couple minutes now and just switch into that particular mode. And then once we've had a little bit of time to circulate that, we're going to go ahead and write them up on the board then so that we can use those moving forward. Okay, guys, so if we were going to put a couple of things up on the board, which will kind of be a foundation for where we move from. Show of hands, who here has a couple of things, or one or two things that they would like to put on the board? Already into that. Okay, good. Let's go ahead and start with this table, and we'll go here, and then we'll kind of go around, okay? So you guys, what did you guys come up with? There you go.
So current landscape is we're leveraging our personal relationships between individual academic members and industry. So I know a company, I know a person there, I know I can make an ask.
Perfect. That's excellent. So do you have maybe like an anecdote or something on how some of your personal relationships that you have built within have helped to facilitate new steps, opening new doors that otherwise wouldn't ordinarily have existed?
Sure.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, because of my relationship with USITT, because of, my relationship with industry partners, I feel perfectly fine calling up any company, especially any company that I have bought a product from, and asking them to come do a demo, come give us some gear. And I've established that relationship over time. I know I can call Tate and say, I have this brilliant student that's out of the realm of what we usually have. Can I get them blah, blah, blah? But it's, part of my issue with that is there is disparity in our industry training. I have what I have that I'm bringing to my table for my students. What about students in general and students at smaller programs who aren't having the same access? And then not that I'm above giving my students an unfair advantage, but that is how we're currently working, which is a one-on-one individual basis, and not necessarily what's good for an entire company and what's good for academia.
Perfect. Thank you very much. All right, over here. Okay, there we go. Perfect.
So we started from the anecdote, and basically the mentality of craft versus corporation, and then also looking at something Megan mentioned, the bespoke nature versus the business need. So what is needed at a corporate level versus the teaching, the philosophy, and the tradition of the craft, and how we align those things from the business standpoint. how are we teaching what is relevant in the industry, even if those folks make an investment in the education, in the curriculum development. The pace of the industry moves so fast, the return on that investment is a diminishing return. Because we make the investment, technology moves. Now we need to either make another investment or that curriculum will fall behind. So the challenges of keeping up with the corporate entity versus the craft.
Does that encapsulate balance between industry needs and pace with traditional curriculum? Okay, perfect, awesome, excellent. That's a very good one. I think that one's going to be coming up a couple of times during the discussions today because it is so foundational. Are you guys ready over here? Yeah. Awesome, okay.
We talked about a couple of different things. One in particular, we really went down the rabbit hole of US ITT, and also some of us also attend IAPA, which the goal is Global Amusements and Attractions, and really some of the differences that we see there between these different entities and how they work and interact with between industry and academia. US ITT seems to be more fertile ground for how they have an overlap with education and industry, whereas IAPA, it's a little bit more of a struggle. I don't think people necessarily know what to do with students when they show up, and so the question is like, how do we create a space for academics and for industry to come together, including students? Because I think in some of these spaces we don't do that well. So, and also setting appropriate and good and healthy expectations for students as well. I think students can often tend to look at industry and go, okay, I need an internship. I'm going to hit on getting an internship at this time of year, and that's it. When, how do we help students better interact with industry through informational interviews? I brought up the example of, I had a student who was like, okay, so I'm going to go to IAPA, I'm going to take my resume, and I'm just going to walk up to people and say, ask them if they have a job, and then I'm going to bring resumes with me. I'm like, no, don't do that, because they're not there to entertain your possibility of getting a job. They're there to sell. And so how do you ask them for their advice on things and ask them for an informational interview so that you can learn more about what they do? And you're going to develop that relationship over time, right? It's built on a networking opportunity. And so I think we have to do a better job or continue to do a better job as academics of preparing our students in terms of when and how they should interact with industry. And then also making sure there's space and opportunity for industry to bring in students and have students connect and see what that looks like. Did I miss anything? Okay.
Okay, so I put down need for more efficient platform to help and facilitate better student-industry interactions and engagement. Does that encapsulate it there?
Thank you, Matthew. Better than GPT. So
there you go. Something better. There you go. Yeah. Yep, I hear you. I hear you on that. Okay. Awesome. All right, let's see here. Did you guys go already? No, let's go and swing. I was going to say, yeah, let's go ahead and do you guys now since we're right over on the side.
I've been talking a lot.
There we go. Okay, perfect.
So we kind of focused on ways that, here at Purdue, we're currently interfacing with industry partners. Obvious connections to Fusion Studio. Additionally, we've had really good luck getting manufacturers to come to campus and provide training for our students. Part of our conversation kind of pivoted and focused on how beneficial it is to get our students in the workforce in these industry, with these industry partners, because it continues to help us with recruiting to show our students doing cool things in the industry. And, hopefully those connections with those future alumni will continue that cycle for us here in academia, to continue to place our students with industry partners who are doing cool and compelling work. Did I summarize that?
Yeah, definitely. Let's see, how would I condense that down? Let me think for a second on that one.
I have faith in you, Matthew.
Yeah.
We talked about the same sort of thing as student success, leveraging the cycle of industry wanting to come back in.
Mm-hmm.
If we are demonstrating success, then that's appealing to industry to come in. to be part of more success, because maybe they come work for you, maybe they're using your gear because they're familiar with it, all of that thing. It's, you know, thank you.
So I'm going to try encapsulating it as the need for engagements, the need for explorations that are valuable,
Maybe it's the cyclical benefit.
cyclical
of
value
students working
building.
in
Exactly,
industry. Yeah.
exactly. The simple fact of them being out there creates an awareness, creates an understanding, creates a value chain that in turn then boils down to that this is something that needs to continuously grow. So,
Student success cycle. Hey, sold. That English degree. Rich GPT.
there you go. Okay, perfect. All right, I think you guys are next. All right, there you go. Okay, you got it? Okay.
I think a core piece we talked about a little was like the idea of timeline and capacity, because like we don't have millions of dollars, but we do have a decent amount of like funding within the university I'm at, and we do some different innovation things, like we're doing some fall protection innovation and like different partnerships. And we had a student's last thesis was like developing a Hudson system, and that was because there was a time thing, right? Of like, if you have time for it, then it can happen. But till like Rich's point of the timeline becoming, are they doing research, are they doing development, are they doing innovation? And it really depends on when in this, like the year, that thing happens to pop up of like, oh, if it's at a time where I have time to get into innovation, then I get to do that. But if it's a time where I'm like, I need to check this box and say I've done this project, then it's like you have to do that piece of like how much timeline capacity is like really influences what is possible. Overall, I think is a core piece. And a thing I threw out at the end was like the idea of, is there, and this is maybe into the next dream piece of a way to decide that like while you're doing shows, is one of your show slots the research and development slot? They're like, you do 5 shows a year, but one of them, it goes through the same process of budgeting, planning to whatever, but you're just like, that's all you're doing in that slot, and it's not like a next piece, but that has 7,000 implications about in like all the other disciplines you're trying to do within your department as a concept, that it's not just about you. I guess is maybe the other current landscape is that most academics, it's not just about you, it's about everybody else that you also impact as the thing that you're doing of how their education of like, if you don't do this, then the directors aren't getting that, or if you're not doing this, then designers aren't getting their education, and how that's also a cyclical piece of it. I just also need a name that lunch is smelling so good, and I'm trying my best. I just need to say it. Just have this mic. If anybody else is feeling it, I'm feeling it.
I think that's what you said about other stakeholders in academic departments is a really good point, right? Like, it's not just that if we were to do a research partnership with Tate for a technical direction student, it might impact Tate if that project isn't successful, but it's also going to have an impact on the set design student whose grade is dependent on their set looking good, and the actors who might have to act on that thing, and the director who's got to restage the thing because now it's not a rotating platform, and building that into the process is tricky. I didn't even think about that, but I think it's a really important piece.
Awesome. That's great. So programs are dependent on careful time and resource budgeting, and elements are highly connected and multiple stakeholders are impacted. So there we go. So are we in agreement that these represent the foundations for an understanding on the overall interactions, partnerships that are built, programs that are developed? Are we all in agreement? Do we think there's anything that we left out, anything that needs to get added onto there? Outstanding. Well, if we're happy with that, then let's go ahead and move on to the next section where we're going to kind of repeat this exercise, but from a different perspective. So instead of focusing on the landscape as it exists right now, we're going to start to identify possibilities within the landscape. So now that we've already explored what is possible, what isn't, I'm sure some of the conversations and discussions you guys have already have gone into the territory of, well, this would be an ideal case, but this is how it looks like. And this is where we could go, but at the moment, this is where we are right now. So to that effect, I've done the same thing with the other segment, and I've pulled together a couple of core areas that can be open for consideration. And I'm going to give you guys the next 5-10 minutes to talk through some of these concepts related to what the tech and industry sectors outside the traditional theater industry, which one of them or multiple of them could benefit from theatrical thinking. So how can we start to think of other industry spaces that have not fundamentally been impacted yet by a theater mindset? Conversely, who are the usual subjects that operate within the industry engagement community that you guys regularly interact with? Who are the usual people, the common names, and why is it that you interact with them? So what is a reciprocal partnership with some of these core spaces and with some of these core industries in the theater sector? How could they potentially extrapolate out to some of these other corporate sectors like healthcare, tech, education, civic planning, et cetera, et cetera? So we're going to take the next 5-10 minutes and just give you guys the chance to talk through some of these ideas and come up with some concepts related to these.
I don't know if that's reciprocal. Maybe parasitic is better, but.
We're going to go ahead and now jump as an extrapolation of what we just talked about and these different ideas. If this is the industry as it currently sits, and this is where we understand the foundation is today, where do we need to take this to identify new opportunities? What are some of the new opportunities, new alignment areas that we need to bring the sector of industry and academia together into? What's the future look like? Does anybody, we're going to go ahead and take a couple of minutes now and just formulate some ideas around that concept. So you guys have identified a couple of key opportunities, and we're taking the industry and academic sector into that next phase. Based on the foundations of where we are today, where do we need to get? Okay, show of hands, who has some stuff to put up on the board ready to go? Okay, awesome. Right. Okay, here we go. Okay.
Cool. Yeah. Hello. Good. Can you hear me? Okay. So we talked about in our group for a new opportunity leveraging some more local relationships. So like Wenger has customers across the country where you might have a performing arts center down the street that has our equipment and you didn't even know it. So if you can also use manufacturers and say, I don't have the money to send somebody to your factory, I don't have the money to pay you guys to come here, but if you have a performing arts center that we know is a really good customer and a very knowledgeable customer, that you could go and get a tour or have an outreach day for students in the regional area. It's not just us that we can help connect you with, but also our customers, so you can get someone a little closer to home. Or if you have a rigging inspection coming up, we usually ask for a venue technician to be around when there's a rigging inspection because they know the venue better, but hey, send a couple students along so they can watch us inspect equipment and keep things up to code, tying in what we talked about yesterday. And identifying and resolving those issues. I would bring that up front if you're getting a quote for rigging inspection, so we don't send the guy that likes to get things done quickly on his own. But that's certainly something you can talk about with manufacturers when you're getting service done. Can we double dip and get a little bit of student outreach at the same time?
Okay, so we might want to touch base back on the manufacturing aspect specifically in a bit, but I put down broad organizational networks and an opportunity to draw them together. That's a broad way of looking at it. Does that encapsulate what you were kind of going for?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. All right, who's next? Over here? Okay, awesome. Okay, there we go.
So we sort of progress. I want to say where we started from, as far as like a sector that you don't think of. First was Children's Hospital, and sort of the way that they map and storytell through, follow the yellow brick road to get to imaging, So we started there, but then we started talking about immersive experiences, and the way, lately museum exhibits almost always have some sort of immersive way that you walk through, and how much our storytelling capability, how our sound design, how our media design now, and going all the way into VR experiences and gaming. But we think that's sort of the next possible new horizon where a lot of our skill set and potentially research and development can happen as partnership with the industry. So that we sort of umbrellaed it as the immersive experience.
So new horizons in immersive experiences. Awesome. Perfect. Perfect. We can go right on over then. Thank you. Okay.
Maybe less so immersive, but just experiences. So like environmental planning and city planning. Like I talked about throughput in an amusement park, how that's like their biggest concern is throughput. But like what if when cities were putting parks together, they actually thought about something like that? And maybe they do, I don't know. But like, in terms of, hey, we want to tell a story here with a space, and there may not be technology involved, there may not be performers, it might just be like creating a great space that we want people to be able to come to and feel convenient, welcomed, safe, not crowded, whatever, insert positive, emotion here. Like part of some of the stuff that is happening in these educational programs about storytelling and experiences could apply in those other areas too. Or like building designs, architecture, making sure that it's like not just functional, but also like welcoming, and people are like, you know what, I like being in here. The other thing I almost got into was content creation and how like it's such a big deal right now. And like, is there a way that content creation becomes like the new marketing? And like yeah, exactly, like social media content creation. And I know people are diving into it now, but like, what if it got really good? Yes, exactly, yeah. Where like you're gonna go and make like hardcore cash for a company that's willing to pay for those kinds of experiences. And it's theatrical in nature, but it's not necessarily the traditional, like, I work at a theater.
But you're still telling a story around it, and you still have that ability to, sorry. I guess we're going next. Sorry, Megan, sorry. Obviously we're all on the same page, because I kind of upvoting exactly what you were talking about. For us, it was, we talked about placemaking, we talked about prototyping, and in those contexts, the placemaking, in and around all of what you've been talking about, and we talked about it in the context of marketing experiences and pop-ups. The prototyping, that was really cool. We were talking about that, the theater does have such a superpower in that. And in the academic context, that superpower bringing across the institution, the different academic disciplines, from architecture to engineering to even the social sciences and psychology, to understand that, end user component as well. I mean, that's obviously what we're all creating for, is our audience member, our visitors. But I think there's a lot of power in that consortium of a prototyping group across disciplines. I feel like there was one more thing.
Outstanding. So I have 2 points here that are similar and related. First one being the integration of storytelling and organizational psychology, integration of storytelling and organizational psychology / space and content design. And then the second one, which is related to it but independent, is the integration of theatrical storytelling in marketing and placemaking, prototyping, utilizing multiple disciplines to make it happen, make it all work together. So those are what I've got right there. Okay, and we're going now over here. Awesome.
I would say, so we talked a little bit about just like how we're pulling in a lot of things and using them not necessarily as intended from other industries, and like what the reverse of that could then be as well, of like, okay, cool, if we're using this, how do we then go the other direction? Then we talked a little bit about like the project management as a concept within theatrical thinking of a lot of folks when they do leave the industry. Part of their sell is that like they can make a project happen on a timeline, which is a fascinating piece of like other industries. That's like, whoa, you got a timeline, like you know how to make a Gantt chart, like it's very fascinating. Right? Exactly, right? It's like, so what do you guys? It's very wild. Of like, oh, now I can bring this to you. Great. Like how does that piece of it work too? So those are some of the things we talked about of that portion of it, of how that can function in civic planning, the crowd management piece, and that's also like just like the management aspect of it. A lot of that in our theatrical worlds, we're doing it very within that realm, but it applies to all of it ultimately.
I mean, the show's going to open on X date. The product has to ship on X date. Same thing.
Yeah, I'd say we're terrible about it. Like, we'll launch a show on time. Like, the show will happen. But like, we have an internal deadline for an internal project. Like, oh, it's delayed. Our CEO was like, I don't understand how we manage projects all day, every day for clients that are paying us money, and we can't seem to do it for ourselves. And I'm like, you're right.
Because the clients are paying you money.
I can't get my porch built either, but by God, that show went up.
Yeah. I literally have a muscle in the back of my house right now because I haven't finished the deck.
Okay, so new application experiences for theatrical project management and time management. I'll put soft skills on there. Okay, so what this exercise has done is pulled together the landscape where it exists and where we can potentially go with it. New opportunities for interaction, for cooperation, collaboration, and the creation of where we could go from today if we have the ability to create new lines, new connections, and new contact points. But that being said, this is all from an internal perspective on how we see and perceive things. And of course, if we're going to do this, we have to work directly hand in hand with industry to take it to this next step there. So moving along here, we're going to actually switch a little bit from this more kind of like classroom workshop model, and we're going to actually focus now on almost like an open forum, specifically around the idea of how can we work industry and how can we build up an interaction with industry that's going to really be enriched by this sort of thinking, where we can say, this is where we're coming from and this is where we understand you are today. How can industry really play a role in finding the next steps with us that are actionable, achievable, and valuable for both us as an institution and as program leads, and then also for the broader industry as a whole? What are some ways that we can do that? Yeah, I'm going to get a microphone here. We're going to run around, and like I said, we're going to be going around the horn, and everyone's going to have a chance to put into this one.
Oh, I think that something that Rich was alluding to in the earlier session was having a matchmaker, an independent group that can, listen to needs and requirements and match with skills and abilities, which, I think to an extent, USA and LDI try to do, but because of the scale and generalization of those areas, it's more difficult to be as specific. And I think that the Fusion Studio does have kind of a prime opportunity to create those more personal connections, and that's not just I'm going to go in and say hi to 1,500 people in a ballroom, and then hope that something comes from it. Here I can be like, hey, Rich, who do I talk to? And then potentially I could say, okay, I'm going to have this one-on-one meeting with this one person, and we are going to figure out where our needs and abilities intertwine. And I'll see.
Perfect. Thank you. Yep.
So I think we've got the opportunity to look at the interactivity or the cross-functionality that we have across all of those. Thinking about this from the student standpoint, we see the engineering and theatrical tie-in and connection, but you mentioned architecture as well. Look at film and television, tourism and hospitality, sports, and all of the other programs that live in the same space. If I just look at a corporate event, I'm going to need film and television educated people because I've got an executive who's talking about something and I need the visuals to all work together. I'm going to need food and beverage aware individuals in that space. I'm going to need, people who understand all of those. The number of sporting events that happen on campus and the dollars that are related to those sporting events, and that is a huge educational opportunity in the live event space that exists. Are we maximizing those partnerships internally, which will then give us broader connectivity looking outwardly? So really, the spider web of all of the things that we realize we can do, how are we looking at those and using those to create those partnerships?
Perfect.
Because why not? Who's the loudest person in the room? It's always me. I think so. What I've been thinking about and tagging off of Evan, what you're saying, USITT has been very good at number one, getting our industry partners into our expo, seeing the value of being there. Even though, honestly, academic theater is not your biggest purchaser, but we're solid and steady. But then discovering and maximizing the way you are having workforce development, right? So our students are now coming to work for your companies. You understand that they are also future purchasers, and we've been able to maximize that value. But a lot of what we're talking about, and since so many of you are USITT members, is what are we doing for mid-career, late-career folks, right? How are we maximizing that? And we haven't, and I'm so excited about these conversations because we haven't talked about how to maximize it with industry. We see each other as I'm a purchaser, you're my vendor. We have a relationship. The R&D side of it, the matchmaking of what are mid-level and late career expertise.
Why do you look at me when you say late career?
And late career. But people who have significant expertise that would be beneficial to industry as we move forward in research and development. And honestly, as the industry is changing and as higher education is changing, that partnership is going to be how whatever this industry becomes survives.
Awesome, thanks. Okay. Anybody else like to weigh in? Okay, I'd like to, oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah, no, it's perfect, perfect. There we go.
I'd like to build off of that too, just because we've started developing a lot of undergrad, and I'm sure there's some development in grad programs too on this combined engineering and entertainment degrees. And then we go into the space and we work it, and then we maybe think about going to grad school later and not sure where our place lies. Because at least doing the engineering and entertainment stuff, I took a lot of the courses that the grad students for the theater department would take. So it's like, I've kind of already taken the grad courses, and if going towards a technical production manager role, I do feel like I need grad school for that, but I don't know where I can get the field experience. And part of that might be if we start looking more into research and industry innovation opportunities, you start to become subject matter experts in pushing innovation on a larger scale than just I'm going to go and have a higher position at a theater production company. So that I think is a hole in education on, okay, we have these engineering, more engineering-based students, where do they go next?
One of the things that we discussed in the panel was the importance of different groups that can pull different research areas together and create, as a consequence, brand new experiences for students to be a part of. So we talked about consortia groups specifically and how those can be fundamental to creating those kind of experiences that bring multiple disciplines, multiple different expertise areas, but then also different mindsets together as well, which is really exciting. So one thing that I think that we should spend a little bit of time on before we close out is the concept of, for these opportunities here, if we were going to define potentially a direction that a consortia group that's focusing on projects, programs, and application areas, if we were going to be discussing something like that, what kind of opportunities could a potential consortia group that is working in this space that pulls engineering and other areas together into one, what are some of the opportunities specifically that we could work towards that could be impacted directly by a consortia group? Yeah, go ahead.
I mentioned this to my group here, as well as texted excitedly to Rich during the last panel. But something that came to mind due to one of the questions was the concept of a summer stock for R&D, of using these spaces, shops, and amenities of a university and housing of a university, and bringing in students and folks, paying them to come in. But instead of, we're going to work on 5 shows in rotating rep, which is, fine and a lot of fun, but also exhausting. We have a consortium of industry that's like, hey, we, as a group of different companies that do similar things, this is one of the tricky problems we're trying to solve. We're not necessarily going for an end goal of this is the product that we need to make, but how do we get past these things? And we have groups of students with student or professional project managers who can go through and iterate and design and present with the funding and resources of combined university and industry folks. And it's like, on and off throughout this thing, I've also been taking more notes. It's like, well, what does a summer stock cost? Okay, so we have that, and what was an R&D budget for a mid-size company going to be, and where can we find the value and interest in that? So still an idea, haven't trademarked it yet, but you've all heard me say it. It's on film. You can't steal this idea yet.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, did you have something?
IP.
Yeah.
Just the intellectual property.
Sure thing. Yeah. There you go. Absolutely. So ultimately, yeah, go ahead.
I think one potential benefit of a consortium on this is to help us compile the problems that we're all trying to solve independently. Because we're relatively siloed. We don't tend to share, our sneaky little problems that we're trying to solve. And if 5 or 10 different universities are trying to solve the same problem, maybe that's a bigger benefit and a bigger draw to our industry partners to throw some real dollars at that.
That brings up a good point. The consortium doesn't have to be a bunch of different industries, like Dr. Liu was talking about. What if it's also inclusive of a number of universities that would maybe be in competition for recruitment, maybe be in competition for job placement, but hey, if we can all get together and solve a big problem.
You just have to agree on the problem.
Yeah, that's very true.
There's always a problem. I would argue not agree on the problem, but agree on the commitment to collaborate as we discover the problem, right? And whatever that collaboration might look like, right? We don't have to have the problem first.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think that brings up a good point that most of the folks in this industry are problem solvers by nature, and then we solve a problem in the way we discover we can solve a problem, rather than stop and identify the problem fully before we solve it, which is a research mentality. So using something like this to look at problems and not go, oh, we can solve it this way. Okay, that works. Let's keep going. But instead go, yeah, let's really dig deep, identify what is the root cause of the problem we're trying to to serve to get all of the way into the weeds of this is the actual problem. This core problem causes all of these other things. So I think something like that gives us a research mentality, attracts people that think from a research place, attracts people who want to publish the work that will attract other researchers and continue to grow that mentality of doing work.
I don't want to hijack your process here, Matthew, but can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Put out there that what we're talking about. I'll do the sound guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I saw his face. He looked upset, so I was like,
Sorry, guys. One of what we're talking about was the idea behind the Fusion Studio when Mary Pilat and I dreamt it up 6 years ago. This is it. And in fact, we worked with university folks. There is a framework for a consortia of industry partners to provide some minor funding to help create some spaces. And there's a framework for the same thing for academic partners. I guess the question is, are folks really interested in that? And I will say that today, this is the first time I've really heard sort of a lot of vocal, yes, that would be an exciting thing. So my question is, what's the next step? How do we get from we all think it's a good idea and then there's some frameworks created to let's do it, let's pull the trigger, let's do a thing. And maybe I'm still too early on that, but what would it take to pull the trigger? What would it take to make something like that happen?
I think the first thing is awareness from our industry partners that academics want that. We don't just want your free gear and your demos. We actually want to discover and research and develop. And I don't feel like that has been said out loud to industry partners. And I don't feel like industry partners have any awareness that some academic areas, again, on the broad spectrum of what a university might be, that there is availability and expertise. That this is just because we are all so siloed, we're all so busy, we're all with finite resources, we're all with such a small margin to succeed. We haven't taken the time to just say, what if we partnered together to maximize discovery?
Question for Casey on that from the research standpoint. USITT has research grants. Is it common that there is money left in that pot every year, or is it all used up?
Yes and no. Some years
Okay.
we have used.
Okay. Okay. So, and the reason I ask that question is, you say, how do we start? And one of the things is, what is the proposal, and then how do we use that proposal to go to the places that have money set aside for those types of programs? If it's a consortium, that means we have a lot of opportunity rather than one place of opportunity, because it always comes back to the funding. How do we fund the work? And the more opportunity we have to understand what we're trying to fund, the better off we are.
I'm just going to add that I know I mentioned it a couple times, but we at the Children's Museum are looking at this model as well, and that's why we've been talking with Chris and Rich and learning from that and thinking about how the web connects together. And so I think that, as we all are having these conversations elsewhere, understanding where there are other consortiums that are going to be, coming together, because I think it just feels like a lot of us are thinking along these lines and we are ready to move into action. We've put it as part of our second century strategic plan to create this space, and it's very nebulous because we're like, innovation, we need funding, we need to learn more about what that looks like and how we engage. But I think that it seems to me like there are parallel conversations in a lot of places. And so it's like there are these different groups that can be connected as well. And so I just want to offer that out too.
And to that end, if you guys don't mind me jumping in really quickly, that can really draw upon some of the discussions we had around the sharing networks and sharing personal relationships as catalysts. So as we're starting to think about next steps and starting to bring some of these organizations together to the table, it might be a good idea to start thinking about, okay, what are some of the strongest relationships we've had in our existing alignment? Would they be interested in aligning with us on this next project? Would we be interested in bringing some new partners in that have emphasized to us that they want to do new things with us and could bring new things to the table versus our existing contacts, existing partnerships, and kind of create a balance between the two? Consortia groups, generally speaking, from my own perspective, working with them that are based specifically in the high-tech sector here at Purdue University, things like the Cooling Technology Research Center and some of the other major powerhouses here at Purdue, they are most successful when you bring the broadness of perspective into account. So going back again to some of the sectors that could potentially be represented, engineering sectors, healthcare sectors, et cetera, some of the different public sectors like you were talking about, civil engineering and civic areas across state and local areas and boundaries. If we start to bring some of these folks in, then that creates what we call a broadness of mind in the body of research. And in that way, then, you get a better perspective on the layers upon layers of all of the different transformational aspects and variables that really bring things to the next step. And that way then the power and sustainability of the group has a longevity to it, if that makes sense. Sorry to jump in there, and I hope I didn't disrupt anybody there, but wanted to point that out super quickly. We are running onto time, but it might be worthwhile, perhaps, Richard, as a follow-up to this workshop, to maybe put some information out there so that folks could get back in touch. And we might have a workshop day specifically around this concept as a follow-up.
Yeah, I love that.
All right.
Matthew, thank you.
Absolutely, my pleasure, and certainly want to appreciate everybody for taking the time to come and join us today, not only for the panel, but also your perspectives and your insights have really made this workshop function here. So thank you all very much for your time today. All right.
And as LP pointed out, lunch is here.